Hey anglers, this is Juan from Juan Fishing. If you like fishing, if you like trout fishing, if you like backpack fishing, if you like kayak fishing, anything fishing, go to my YouTube channel and check it out. I'm going to teach you today how to tie a very simple elk haired caddis. It's a great fly pattern that you can use to fish a dropper off of because it's highly buoyant, or you can just fish it as a dry fly on its own. It's one of those flies that works around the country. I'm going to teach you a really simple way to fish it, really simple way to tie it so that you can spend less time tying and more time on the water. Okay, to tie this elk-haired caddis, this very simple version, we're going to need just a few materials and a few tools. So the materials, first I've got some natural colored yearling elk hair. That's going to be the wings. I've got for the body blue wing olive colored super fine dry fly dubbing. For the hook I'm going to use is basically a size 12 typical dry fly hook. And then the thread we're going to tie with today that ties in well with the color of the wings or the elk hair is going to be ultra thread 140. My tools: hair stacker for the elk hair. Need my scissors, obviously, to cut. Whip finisher to finish off the fly. Then to make things secure, I'm going to use a little bit of head cement and use my really highly technical applicator, which is a toothpick. So we've got our materials, we've got our tools down. Let's go ahead and start tying. Okay, let's go ahead and tie this elk-haired caddis. Very simple version. So the first thing I like to do and get out of the way is cutting the elk hair for the actual wings. I'm going to go ahead and cut it and then kind of set it aside and stack it. Take a look here. I'm going to cut about maybe like a half a pencil worth of elk hair off of this hide here. So I got a little bit extra using my scissors here. Got a little bit extra, more than I'd like to. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of try to put my scissors down, but what I'm going to do is kind of take it and try to get some of the short pieces of hair and look for the under fur too. This one's a pretty good quality piece of hair, and so it doesn't have a lot of under fur with it. I even have a little brush that I made out of Velcro and like a popsicle stick. It even has a little magnet on the end to pick up stuff, and so I'll just brush it out. I'm really not coming up with much, so we're going to go ahead and put this in the stacker. I'm going to take the tips and then take my stacker and basically put it in. I'm just kind of tapping it for now. Then I'm just going to kind of set it aside so I don't knock it down. So I've got my hook already. It's a size 12 dry fly hook in the vise. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of start with my Vivus 140 and just kind of prep the hook here. I always run that tag way back. I'm running back to about equal with the barb here, and so that's where I'm going to stop, and that's kind of the end of my thorax, the end of my body. And so now I'm going to go ahead and get some dubbing going. One of the things I like to do when I'm dubbing with really fine dubbing is use some sponge with some water on it so I can get my fingers a little bit moist so I get better traction when I'm spinning it onto my thread. I also like to turn my hook point away from me here, and that keeps it out of the way and it doesn't catch on the fine dubbing. So I'm reaching in my bag now and I'm going to just get a really just minuscule amount. Some would even call this too much. I'm just going to lightly put it on there. I'd rather use too little and have to add than have clumps of it on my fly and then have to try to figure out what to do. So now I'm making basically touching wraps heading towards the eye of the hook. Touching wraps with my thread. Okay, I just ran out of dubbing, and so I'm going to reach in again and pull out a little bit. I'm going to moisten my fingers again and then spin that onto the thread and just continue. So what I'm going to also do is try, as I get closer to the eye of the hook, just try to build up a little bit of taper into build in a little bit of taper into the thorax of the body. I'm going to take a very small amount here, just barely see it, and twist it on to my thread. I'm just basically coloring the hook. And then again, touching wraps. I'm trying to build a little bit here. I'm going to actually stop. I'm almost ready to stop with my dubbing, but I'm going to stop with my dubbing about a hook eye away from the actual hook eye. So my distance is about a hook eye away from the actual hook eye, if that makes sense. I'm probably going to have to pull some dubbing off here. So right there is where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go the whole way behind the hook eye. That's going to leave me some room to tie in the wings and to whip finish and so forth. And also I think it helps me keep from having the hairs slide down off the side of the hook. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn my hook the right way, I guess you could call it. And now I'm pretty much ready for my elk hair. I'm going to tap it down. I'm going to show you what this looks like when it comes out of here. So I'm tapping it down, use my hair stacker. I'm going to turn it sideways, open it up, and see if I have everything lined up. Everything looks pretty lined up, and I just messed it up. So now it's not lined up. Let's do that again. Got some dubbing on my fingers stuck there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it sideways, open it up, and she's stacked up pretty nicely. I had a couple flyaways that I'll get rid of in a second. So now I've got it with my left hand. My left hand, I've got those tips. Now what I need to do is measure my wing. And to do that, I'm going to actually take it from my left hand, and I'm going to take my right hand and come up and then grab the butt ends here. And I do have some flyaway, shorter hairs that I'm going to get rid of here. And so now I've got this in my other hand, and so I can take these tips and line them up with the back of my hook. It's going to give you pretty much a perfect length wing every time. I try to push the tips just a tiny touch past the bend of the hooks, and then I'm going to again switch hands and grab the tips this time, just keeping it where it's at. Now I've got this thing stacked on top of my, see it's stacked on top of my hook, and that's kind of how I want to cinch it down on the top of the hook. I don't want it to roll over the sides of the hooks. So what I'm going to do is actually, to help that a little bit, is I'm going to spin my thread to the right, and that's actually going to tighten up the strands and make the strands wrap tighter, and so it'll cut into the hair a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap around once, wrap around, and I'm lifting up now. You can see the hair starting to flare. Wrap again, lift up, wrap underneath again, lift up, and each time I'm just kind of pulling a little bit tighter each time. You got to be careful you don't go nuts and break your thread. What I did about 4 or 5 wraps there. And you can see my hair is still on top of the hook. That's exactly what I want. Now I've got this big kind of ball of tips out there. A lot of people will cut those tips before they get to this point, but I like to have them there because I do something else now. I'll take these tips. Some guys tie through those tips to cinch it down even more. I don't really do that. So now I've got that hair cinched down on top of the hook. Everything's laying on top of the hook. I'm going to go ahead and take this ball here as best I can, grab it with my fingers, and just kind of pull it back away from the eye of the hook. And now I'm going to transfer my thread to in front of the hair and right behind the eye of the hook. And so that allows me to tie in really nicely there. So now I've got some stuff going down here, but we'll get rid of that in a minute. So now I've got about 3 wraps there. I'm going to get rid of some of those butts. The butts are getting in the way. So I've got it wrapped a couple times there, and my hook eye is very clear now in terms of having hair or anything else. Now I'm going to take my head cement, and what I do here, instead of trying to put head cement after I've whip finished, I'll put some head cement on the thread, because you just don't, you don't need a lot. Just put some head cement on the thread, and then once again I'll come up with my whip finisher, and I've got that ball of hair there. I'm going to kind of pull it back there, and I'm just going to go ahead and maybe I got a couple hairs that got in the way. Now it's pushing my, there we go. Got about 3 turns. I did 4 turns. Now we're back in business. You can see I've got that 3 turns there. That should be enough with the head cement on there. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that thread. So now I've got really nice wings there, but I've also got this big ball of tips here. So I'm going to take and use my finger to pull up on the hair, get it situated. I'm going to start to pull on those tips, grab those tips and kind of pull them forward to get them out of the way. Now, once I pull them forward, I'm going to cut at the same angle of the wings. I've got all those tips. Just going to come in here, and I can see this pretty good. Just cut an angle. And now I got a nice little head on there too. So what I do is I take a look at it. I say, hey, did I get all the tips? There's like one stray tip there I can see. Or one stray butt, big thick butt there. And I'm going to kind of trim everything. And now I've got my head pretty much at an angle with the wings, the wing hair, and I'm in pretty good shape. So I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to check the belly. I like to look and see if there are any flyaways, and there's actually some butts going downward. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut these butts. There's a couple butts there, and just kind of trim them out. So now I've got them trimmed out. You can see the other thing I'm doing here, I'm using my vise and my thumb to control my scissors. I like doing that. So now I've trimmed the butts. There's no other butts there. We got some really nice wings going on. One other thing you can do here, I usually stop right here, but there's a butt right there. I usually stop right here because I got a pretty good elk hair. If you want to make this a little bit more, I kind of pull up to make sure I don't have any hairs that slid around the hook, and which I didn't. If you really want to make it a little bit more secure, I turn it upside down and I've exposed these threads on the bottom here that I use to cinch down the wings. And so I can take my glue again in my fancy toothpick applicator, use my hand on my vise to control it so I don't get glue into the eye of the hook, and then I can go ahead and just touch it, and those threads soak up the glue, and there you have it. I'm just going to get rid of them. I'm getting really picky now. I've got like 2 butts that are barely long enough to be noticeable, but they're blocking the eye, I think, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them. So there you go. So I got some nice wings. They're pretty much measured out for the body. I've got a nice head there that helps add flotation, and the body, because I didn't put any any hackle wrapped around it, it'll get I don't put any floating on it. I usually just leave it the way it is. I'll put floating on the wings, work floating into the head of the fly, and then I let the body kind of get waterlogged so that it rides real nice in the water, and that body, the thorax, is actually below the water surface. I think that's a really nice look, a really nice presentation, and I've got a lot of success on this, and there's enough hair there to float a dry dropper, float a nymph off the back, even a small beaded nymph off the back of this fly. Awesome fly. Only take you a couple minutes to tie once you get into it, and then you can hit the water. You spend less time tying and more time fishing.